In this week's episode, I continue exploring new locations in Iceland. I get caught out photographing in some pretty inclement weather, try my hand at photographing inside of a glacial ice cave, and set the film camera up on a waterfall surrounded by ice. And if you haven't seen the videos from my previous adventures in Iceland, I've left a link to a playlist in the description down below where you can watch those after this video course. I am at Hvitserkur, something like that. I'm trying, okay? But what it is this really impressive looking rock formation. It looks kind of like some sort of an animal or something. I'm not sure exactly what. But it's a fantastic subject to shoot. So I've got this framed up with a Canon R5, my 16 to 35 millimeter. And currently right now I'm shooting kind of towards the middle end of that focal length, around 24 to 28 millimeters. I've been taking a variety of different shots, some really wide, some with the 14 millimeter prime, which looked really good. It was closer to the ground. But now I've kind of set my tripod up higher, about chest height here, because I want more mid-ground. Because what's going on is this whole beach, at low tide, when I first got here, like all the water was really far away. So this was all just kind of sand and and footprints and stuff like that. But now the tide is incoming. It's coming at me right now. So the water keeps rising and I keep having to back up and back up and back up because I'm getting closer and closer to getting my feet wet. But what's happening is as the water comes in, there's chunks of floating ice in the foreground, in the mid-ground, I should say. And I think that's really cool looking. Thus the reason why I've raised my tripod so that I can capture more of that mid-ground and get those ice tiles. I think it looks really cool. Done a variety of different exposures. So these are faster exposures because the tiles are moving. I don't want them to blur too badly. So I'm shooting about 1/6 of a second right now. But I was shooting some earlier with a 10-stop filter that just completely smooths out all the water in front of it. Gives it a really abstract feel. Some of the clouds are kind of moving too, so it helped the sky a little bit with that. And a 14 millimeter, I was shooting kind of somewhere in between there because it has a bulbous front end on it, so I can't fit my ND filters on the front. There's no filter thread. But with the R5, I've got the mount that has the built-in circular polarizer that goes behind the lens in the mount, which is really handy for that lens in particular. So I was able to use a polarizer, but it also has about a stop and a third of darkening to it too, which also brought my shutter speed down. Got birds flying in the frame, so I was trying to capture them in flight. I don't think I got them very sharp though. 1/6 of a second's a little too slow. But as I was saying, with the 14 millimeter, I actually had some ripples coming in. Before these ice tiles come in, it was just kind of like rippling water because there's a pretty good breeze here. So I was using the ripples in the foreground and I was shooting at a faster shutter speed to capture those. So I've had a variety of different things going on here with these exposures. It's been a lot of fun. I've been camped out here for a couple hours now waiting for the tide to come up. It seems like it was well worth the wait because I really like how this is turning out. The ice was an unexpected thing. I didn't expect to see that come in at all. But as the tide comes in, it's been bringing all these sea ice in with it, and it looks really cool. I really like that. But either way, it's always just great to be out here shooting. Just being in the landscapes is a great time, but when you got, epic, crazy landscapes like this, it makes it all the better. So, but in any case, here's these exposures. So I checked myself into this hostel for the night. It's kind of unique. Check this out. cool is that? First snowy day I've seen since I got into Iceland. I mean, to be fair, this is the kind of weather I was expecting the whole time this trip. It's just bizarre to me that I had to come all the way to the north of the country. I'm walking up to Godafoss right now. This is the first snow I've seen this whole trip. It's kind of bizarre. I had more snow at home in Utah. I can see already this is going to be a great view. The amount of ice, slush that's just flowing out of this waterfall is incredible. Oh yeah. The weather conditions deteriorated from snowy to a full-blown blizzard. I wasn't really too worried about that photography-wise, since I had planned this whole trip expecting to be shooting in winter weather. But the wind gusts were brutal and made it absolutely impossible to shoot video. I managed to fire off a few shots with the Canon R5, but I'm amazed that any of them turned out sharp at all, since I had to hold on to the tripod to keep the wind from blowing it over. The winter storm conditions continued throughout the rest of the day, as the entire southeast corner of Iceland was engulfed in this whiteout. So I checked myself into a hostel for the night to wait out the weather, and awoke the next morning to much better weather conditions, which was a good thing, because my plan for the morning was a tour of an ice cave. There's several tour providers operating out of the same area, and near as I could tell, they all seem to offer a pretty similar experience. The ticket price includes a ride and a pretty jacked up 4x4 vehicle, and it's about 10 to 15 minutes over some pretty rugged terrain, which is all glacial till deposited there by the receding glacier. Most tours are only offered during the colder months of the year, since in the summer, the caves and crevasses are filled with meltwater. That also means that from year to year, the experience is different. A cave that existed one year will be gone the next, so the tour operators search for new caves each year. That makes each visit a fleeting moment in time, and the experience and photographs you take from there are entirely unique and will never exist in the same way again.
Everybody come over here.
Incredible.
Photographing inside of such truly ancient ice poses its own interesting set of challenges. The light penetrating the ice from the sky above is captivating and iridescent looking, but it's quite dim, which means slower shutter speeds and fast apertures. But the ice is also translucent, and the bubbles and cracks in the ice are quite interesting, so you also want enough depth of field to capture those embedded features, sometimes several inches deep in the ice. A wide-angle lens was a must. I shot everything inside the ice on my Canon R5 with my 14mm f2.8 prime, and I also carried a tripod with me, which was a hassle, but was well worth it. The space was very cramped, and I had to work fast, but being able to expose at smaller apertures was crucial. Still, even at 14mm, often I was only inches from the surface of the ice, so focus stacking was required in order to capture sharpness throughout the frame.
I am at Hvitserkur Beach, something like that. I think that's how you say it. It's got these really cool rock formations that are out to see. They're really popular. People shoot these a lot. Makes sense. It's really cool looking, and it's really easily accessible. But I'm just right out on the beach, right out on a black sand beach. It just happened to be sunset when I was driving by, so I thought, while the getting's good, I might as well get out here and shoot this, Yeah, it's well photographed, but I certainly don't care. But I've set up with the Canon R5. I actually looked to see if I had enough lens reach to shoot it with the film camera, and I don't. I can't make a composition that works, so I don't have a long enough lens. So it's gonna have to be the R5. I'm shooting with my 70-200, right at about 135 millimeters right now. And I'm trying a number of different things here. I've been playing with my shutter speed, trying to decide what looks the best. Originally, I just framed nothing but just these rocks, this rock formation on here, these sea stacks, I guess is what they are. But then there's all this wave action. This is pretty close to high tide. I think it's actually going out. The tide's going out right now. But there is a lot of wave action still, so I decided to switch to a vertical composition and use a little bit of that in the foreground. And now what I'm doing is I'm playing with my cable release trigger. I just got it set to, to where I can just trigger exposure. I'm watching the back of the LCD here. Wait until I get a wave kind of in about the spot that I want it, and then I just fire off an exposure, so I don't have to mess with the camera and shake it at all. But I think it looks really cool with these wave crests coming in a little bit. But it's all just a matter of timing, trying to get the shutter press at the right time where it looks pleasing, isn't awkward. that's kind of a challenge. So I'm sitting here taking multiple exposures over and over and over and over. And on top of that, my exposure keeps changing because, well, the sun's going down. So the clouds keep getting more and more colorful, but my foreground gets darker and darker. And these rocks are very dark. So I don't want to be in so much shadow that they lose their detail. I don't want to have to boost too much in post, otherwise you get noisy shadows. So it's just kind of a case of continually changing my exposure to match the light as it diminishes. Like I said, I just happened to be driving by while it was right around sunset. So, I had a location, had the time, why not? It's been a brutally windy couple days. There's been a lot of weather and it's super windy. So it's kind of nice to be able to stand here on this beach with my back to the wind and not absolutely freeze to death. But here's this shot. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. So this is Kvernufoss. It's nice and early in the morning, so it's a little cold, especially with the spray from the waterfall, but I'm set up on with the Horseman VH, shooting Superbia 100F on a vertical composition of this waterfall. So I have framed an entire column of water and just a crack of the sky above it here. And then down in the bottom here, if I move the camera down, you can see where the water's draining out along this river here. There's a big chunk of ice here. Everything's coated in ice here because of all of the spray of the waterfall. But it's giving everything a nice white texture. Not a ton of color in this, but I decided to shoot Provia anyway because I don't have any more black and white with me. There are just a little bit of green hues in here too, so that I think Provia will help with that, make that look really nice. I shot 2 exposures, 1/4 f/16 2/3. But then I was a little worried about this whole patch of sky up here. So then I bracketed 1 stop, took an exposure at f8, f/16 2/3. And I was also concerned that shutter speed was a little long for the column of water. I want to make sure I keep a little bit of texture in here so I don't wipe all of that out. So I took another exposure at 1/15, f11 2/3. So a little bit faster, and then I compensated for the difference in light by opening my aperture. The big challenge with this one is the camera's getting pretty wet, so the lens, is constantly getting hit with water spray. So you have to keep wiping it, make sure that the lens is clean. So that's been a bit of a struggle here. I was fortunate; it was kind of a cloudy morning this morning, so it keeps the direct light off of this waterfall, so you don't get a ton of glare. Gives me a little softer lighting conditions. Made this shot a little more possible. I think it's kind of pushing Provia's dynamic range just a little bit, but I'm hoping it'll be okay. There's lots of cool stuff around this whole little canyon and this waterfall, so I think now it's time to get the camera out of here before it gets completely soaked, or more soaked than it is, and see if I can find maybe another composition or two. Probably a few on the digital as well. So either way, here's those exposures.
Of the 4 exposures I took of this subject, I definitely liked the faster shutter speed versions, since I held a little more detail in the highlights and the texture in the water column is better. You might have noticed I managed to capture the bed of the camera itself in the bottom edge of the frame. I hadn't noticed that in the field because the light on the foreground wasn't very bright, and I hadn't brought a dark cloth on this trip, instead deciding to rely on the pop-up hood on the back of the Horseman to save weight in my luggage. That's something I probably won't do again. Still, this one is a bit of an enigma to me. After seeing the film and realizing my mistake, I tried to reproduce it on the camera to see where I went wrong, but for whatever reason I couldn't recreate it. The Horseman VH does have a drop bed to deal with this exact issue, but unfortunately the Rodenstock 65mm lens I have is right in the range where it can't focus with the bed dropped. So I'm not sure what kind of careless setup I managed in order to achieve this, but it's something I now know to be careful of when I'm shooting vertical with that lens. Fortunately though, there was enough room in the foreground, I was able to crop it out.
I'm back at Sohaima Yoku or something like that. Just a really awesome looking glacier. I was here last time with the 4x5, shooting 6x12. This time I've just been walking around checking out ice abstracts. I think the biggest difference now is that, you know, as opposed to last time I was here, is that the lagoon in front of the glacier is frozen, which is really awesome. So I flew the drone to get some aerial shots of all the cracks in the ice leading up to the glacier and stuff. That was really cool. And then I ran around with the wide angle lens, you know, shooting from the banks of this ice. You don't want to walk out too far on this ice. If you break through, that's going to be real bad. But I was shooting kind of some cracks and bubbles, whatever I could find, just from the edges of the ice with the wide angle lens. And then a handful of telephoto shots, just kind of picking out details. Yeah, it's a really cool location. And I'm glad to see that at least something's different. In this case, it's all the ice that's on the lagoon.
Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, you can let me know by hitting that thumbs up button down below, and maybe while you're down there, consider hitting that subscribe button so you don't miss the next couple videos. Thanks again, take care, and I'll catch you in the next video.